The development and production of the M-84 main battle tank by the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia perfectly symbolized the national slogan, Brotherhood and Unity, just a decade before the country fell apart. It combined the economies and production capacities of 6 Yugoslav multi-ethnic republics to produce what will become their national pride. Considered one of the most ambitious projects undertaken by the Yugoslav industry, it proved how complex and demanding tank production can be, even for medium-sized countries. Welcome to a new Tank Encyclopedia voiced article. I'm your host Stan, and if you like our work, please do consider subscribing on Patreon or donating on PayPal. All of the funds gathered there are used to pay for the amazing illustrations you see on our website and in our videos. Every little bit helps. In the early 70s, the T-72 appeared on the world stage and captured the interest of Yugoslav military experts. It was available for sale, but obtaining a license for its production was impossible during the first years, even for Warsaw-packed countries, let alone Yugoslavia. In 1978, after Yugoslav military officials had seen the T-72 during a presentation near Moscow, a decision was made to purchase the license. The Soviets quickly rejected the request with an explanation that Yugoslavia was not able to produce such a vehicle due to its complexity. Shortly after, President Tito visited the USSR, and even with the strong objection of the Soviet Ministry of Defense, he managed to convince Leonid Brezhnev, the General Secretary of the Communist Party, to sell the license to the Yugoslavs. The price was $39 million, equivalent to $162 million in today's values, with the license expiring after 10 years or 1,000 produced tanks. The agreement also stated that Yugoslavia could not sell, modify or co-produce the tank with other countries without the USSR's approval. Before the beginning of production, obtaining various machines and tools proved to be very difficult. For example, in order to reduce the weight, the tank's main wheels were made out of aluminum alloy. The production process was very complex, requiring a 30,000-ton press, additional smaller presses, and a special furnace. At that time, there was only one press of similar characteristics in the whole of Europe. The production was a real endeavor. Over 200 companies from all 6 of Yugoslavia's republics were contracted to produce different parts and subsystems, along with the Đuro Đaković factory, responsible for the final assembly. The prototype, designated T-72MJ, was finished in April 1983, followed by 10 test vehicles in 1984. Serial production started in 1985 and the vehicle received its new designation, M-84. For its time, the M-84 was a fairly modern tank with good protection thanks to its composite armor. The upper front plate had a slope of 68 degrees and consisted of a 80mm rolled homogeneous steel plate, followed by 105mm of glass-reinforced plastic called Textilite, backed by a 20mm steel plate. This armor arrangement equated to around 350mm of rolled homogeneous armor against armor-piercing fence-stabilized discarding sabot, and around 450mm against high-explosive anti-tank projectiles. The lower front plate was at a 60-degree angle with a thickness of 80mm. Some additional 20mm of protection was in the form of a mounted dozer blade, and it also enabled the tank to dig a cover for itself in a short amount of time. The hull sides were vertical and had a thickness of 80mm at the crew compartment and 70mm at the engine transmission compartment, while the back plate was 40mm thick and inclined at 30 degrees. The floor and engine deck were just 20mm thick. Rubber side skirts were also mounted to reduce the amount of dust kicked up by the tank when moving. While the hull had a welded construction, the turret was cast. Due to its variable thickness, it provided approximately 280 to 380 mm of rolled homogeneous armor protection. This early armor layout was equivalent to the T-72M and had no composite material in the turret. The tank featured nuclear, biological, chemical protection equipment and two ways of deploying a smokescreen. The first was using 12 smoke discharges on the turret front. These launched grenades 150 meters in front of the tank, making a smokescreen either 20 meter or 100 meter wide, which lasted 4 to 5 minutes. The second was through the use of an engine smoke generation system. The system sprayed fuel into the hot exhaust to create a trail of white smoke behind the tank. The M-84 was also equipped with an automatic fire extinguisher system. The M-84 tank was armed with a smoothbore 2A46 125mm main gun with a thermal sleeve, the same gun as on the T-72 Soviet main battle tank. It could fire APF-SDS with 350mm of penetration at 90 degrees at 2 km, Heat FS with 500mm of penetration at 90 degrees, and high explosive fragmentation ammunition. The gunner also had a 7.62mm PKT coaxial machine gun at his disposal, while the commander operated a 12.7mm NSVT anti-aircraft machine gun. The main difference between the T-72 and the M-84 was in the fire control system. The new FCS was developed domestically and had better capabilities compared to the one used in the T-72M. It was named SUV M-84 and was claimed to be comparable to the best fire control systems in the world at that time. The main module was the DNNS-2 gunner's sight with an integrated laser rangefinder. This device was installed on the left side of the turret in front of the gunner's hatch. It had two different magnifications, by 3 and by 7, while the night channel had a by 8.5 magnification. The night channel had a second generation image intensifier. The gunner also had a direct vision periscope. The commander was equipped with a DNKS-2 binocular periscope with a 360-degree view and image intensifier for night operation. With a press of a button, he could slew the turret to the target's direction and engage it himself. There were 4 additional periscopes at his disposal. Another component of the FCS was the meteorological sensor located on the front of the turret roof, which measured wind speed, ambient temperature, and atmospheric pressure. The FCS used this information, combined with additional data such as distance to the target, powder charge temperature, the longitudinal and horizontal tilt angle, and the tank's movement speed, to ensure high first hit probability while on the move or when stationary. While the gunner tracked a moving target, the FCS automatically applied lead by calculating the target's angular velocity. Instead of a human loader, the tank had an electromechanical autoloader for the main gun. With one crew member less, the turret could be made smaller and better armored for the same weight. The autoloader was located under the turret on the tank's floor. It held 22 rounds in its rotating carousel, while additional 20 rounds were stored in the crew compartment. The autoloader had a fixed loading angle, which meant that the gun needed to be elevated to +3 degrees in order to line up with the breech with the ammo rammer. Since the gunner's sight was independently stabilized and not slave to the gun, the sight remained on target during the loading process. The rate of fire was 8 rounds a minute. Contrary to popular belief, the carousel was well protected from shrapnel in case of a turret penetration. A door through which the ammunition passed closed after the loading process, protecting the ammunition. Though the ammunition in the carousel might be safe for most penetrations, the ammunition in the crew compartment could still ignite. Studies after the 1991 Gulf War showed that most of the catastrophic explosions of Iraqi T-72s were caused by ammunition outside the carousel getting hit. The M-84 was powered by the V46-6, a 38.8-liter V12 multi-fuel engine delivering 780 horsepower. It could use diesel, low-octane gasoline or kerosene. The engine was reliable and gave the tank adequate mobility with a 19 horsepower per ton power-to-weight ratio. The manual transmission had 7 forward and 1 reverse gears. The only downside was a painfully slow reverse of just 4 km per hour, which plagued almost all tanks built on the T-72 platform. Although useful while maneuvering and parking in a non-combat environment, it seriously hampered the ability to quickly reverse out of trouble. The tank had a fuel capacity of 1,600 liters and an operational range of 700 kilometers on-road and 460 off-road. Depending on the terrain, fuel consumption went from 230 to 350 liters per 100 kilometers. The tank had a torsion bar suspension with double shock absorbers on the first, second and sixth pairs of doubled road wheels. The tracks, 580mm wide, were supported by 3 return rollers. The sprocket wheel was at the back. The system could span a 2.8-meter trench, climb an 85cm wall, and ford 1.2 meters without preparation. With full preparation, it could ford water obstacles 5 meters deep and 1,000 meters wide. In total, around 650 M-84s of all variants were produced. The most numerous variant was the basic M-84, with 370 vehicles made between 1984 and 1987. In 1987, a new variant of the M-84 started production and received the designation M-84A. While firepower remained the same, armor protection and mobility were substantially improved. The upper frontal plate had a different laminate layout and consisted of a thin 60mm high hardness steel plate welded to a 60mm rolled homogeneous plate, followed by 105mm of Textilite backed by a 50mm plate. While the basic M-84 had a simple cast steel turret, the M-84A's turret had a cavity filled with quartz sand mixed with an adhesive. The thickness of this insert was 130mm. The tank's new armor layout was claimed to be effective against contemporary NATO 105mm projectiles. Mobility was improved by replacing the old 780 horsepower engine with a 1000 horsepower V46TK. The new engine gave the M-84A an excellent power-to-weight ratio of 24 horsepower per ton. This was enough to propel the 41.5-ton tank to a respectable top speed of 65 km per hour. Around 100 vehicles were assembled until the end of production in 1992. The M-84AB was an export variant made for Kuwait. It impressed the Kuwaitis after it won a desert trial against the M1A1 Abrams, and they made an order for 200 M-84ABs and 15 M-84ABK command tanks. The price was $1.58 million per vehicle. Around 150 were shipped to Kuwait before the Yugoslav Civil War and a small number after the war. It differed from the M-84A by having a desert color scheme, slightly different positioning of the smoke launchers, Rakel Dana or Jaguar 5 radio instead of the standard RUT-1, a conventional searchlight on the right turret front, lettering in Arabic, additional equipment for desert operation, and around 200 smaller changes requested by Kuwait. The command versions had a generator for keeping the tank's radios and electrical systems running with the engine off. During the 1991 Gulf War, M-84s operated alongside coalition tanks against the Iraqis, but somewhat cautiously. The M-84 could be easily mistaken for an enemy T-72 during the night or in a sandstorm, and potential friendly fire was a major concern. Luckily, this did not happen. Kuwait found their M-84s excellent in desert conditions. Even though Croatia only had a 25% share in the M-84 production, the company that assembled the tank into a finished product was on its soil. After the breakup of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia, the Đuro Đaković factory still had enough parts to roll out new M-84s and pass on M-84ABs intended for export to Kuwait to the newly established Croatian army. After the war, many M-84ABs were finally delivered to their original buyer. Some were kept in service and by 2003 modernized together with the remaining M-84As. The main objective of modernization was the fire control system. A new FCS called Omega-84 was developed in cooperation with the Slovenian company Fotona and is claimed to be more effective than the original SUV M-84. It had new stabilization systems for the sight and the main gun, a new meteorological sensor, a second-generation image intensifier for night operation, and a new laser rangefinder accurate up to 10 kilometers with a probable error of plus-minus 7.5 meters. The rest of the tank was left basically unchanged. This variant received the designation M-84A4 Sniper. As of 2021, the Croatian army still operates around 80 tanks of this type. Another Croatian upgrade to the M-84 that incorporates many modern improvements is the mid-2000s M-84D. The tank is equipped with explosive reactive armor of Israeli origin along with the Omega-84D FCS, featuring a thermal imager, laser warning receivers, navigation and battle management systems for improved situational awareness. An air conditioning device was installed to improve the crew's comfort. The commander's independent weapon station with a 50 caliber Browning M2 machine gun is also added. This rectifies the safety problem of using the old non-remotely fired heavy machine gun in a combat environment. The turret's traverse system is now electric, which operates faster and more precisely than the old hydraulic system. A bustle rack that doubles as RPG slat armor protection is located at the back of the turret, as well as laser warning receivers. The engine remained the 1000 horsepower V4060K, but a new automatic transmission was installed. A more powerful engine could be ordered. The M-84D has a modular construction that provides potential buyers with a degree of freedom in choosing the tank's subsystems and equipment. This upgrade package was intended for Kuwait and Croatia's army, but neither of them decided to upgrade their tanks to M-84D standards yet. The tank remains at the prototype stage. In July of 2004, on the 55th anniversary of the Serbian company Yugo Import, the M-84AB1 was revealed. This was a modernized M-84AB model primarily intended for export. The cost of modernization was around $1 million per vehicle. The armor was improved by the addition of Contact 5 ERA in a layout similar to the Russian T-90 MBT. Protection was further enhanced with the Shtora 1 soft kill passive protection system. This Soviet system dates back to the early 1980s and is an electro-optical jammer that uses two infrared dazzlers to disrupt semi-automatic command-to-line-of-sight anti-tank guided missiles. It is also equipped with laser warning receivers that detect and inform the crew of incoming laser beams from rangefinders and target designators. The firepower was also improved. A new fire control system was installed coupled with the Thales Catherine QW gunner's sight. Improved main gun stabilizer, meteorological sensor and crew periscopes were also installed. The newer 2A46M main gun enabled the tank to fire modern APF-SDS projectiles with around 550mm of penetration at 2.2 km, a tandem charge heat projectile with around 600mm of penetration, and a reflex ATGM that has a range of 5 km and a penetration of 700 to 900mm. The commander can now fully take control of the main gun and remotely operate the heavy machine gun. Two different engine options were offered with the M-84AB1. The V4060K with 1000 horsepower or the V46TK1 with 1200 horsepower. The tank had a new type of tracks with extended service life from 3000 to 8000 kilometers. In 2009, the M-84AB1 was renamed M-84AS. Kuwait tested this modification, but the decision to upgrade their M-84 fleet to this standard was not made. This variant can arguably be described as a commercial failure. The Serbian army operates around 10 examples of the M-84AS. The most recent Serbian modification is known as the M-84AS1. Not much is officially revealed about the tank, but some assumptions can be made. The tank's base armor is probably augmented by a new domestic M19 ERA, which is claimed to be effective against tandem charge heat and free BM-42 Mango APFSDS projectiles. Laser warning receivers are also present on the turret. The explosive reactive armor covers a large portion of the fighting compartment sides, and slat armor protects the engine and transmission compartment from rocket-propelled grenade attacks. The M-84AS1 is planned to have a second stage of modernization called M-84AS2. What systems will be upgraded in the second stage, or how many tanks will be upgraded on the M-84AS1-AS2 standard, is not revealed yet. In the mid-1990s, the M-84AI armored recovery vehicle was developed on the chassis of the M-84A with the help of Polish engineers and strongly resembles their WZT-3. It has vehicle recovery and towing equipment along with hydraulic dozer blades for landscaping and barrier removal. A crane was mounted for lifting heavy objects or assisting in vehicle repair. For vehicle recovery, the main winch with a pulling force of 300 kilonewtons and a 200-meter cable was used. It has a mechanical drive with a 2-speed transfer case. An additional smaller hydraulic winch with 2 tons of force and a 400-meter cable was used for less demanding tasks. The TD-50 hydraulic telescopic crane with a capacity of 15 tons has 360 degrees of motion and a maximum lifting height of 8.6 meters. The vehicle was also equipped with a welding apparatus and tool sets for lighter repairs. The transport platform on the back has a 3,500 kg capacity. The vehicle is powered by the 1000 horsepower V46TK and weighs 42 tons. Only 5 examples were built. The M-84s were operated by all sides during the chaotic and bloody Yugoslav civil war that lasted from 1991 to 1995. This topic is very complex and accurate information is not available for many units that use these tanks. Given the fact that T-55s and T-34s still made the majority of unit strengths, M-84s were in comparison less common. Before the start of the Civil War, each armored brigade was equipped with 40 tanks. The actual number once the conflict began and reinforcements were harder to come by is uncertain. As the war progressed and the former republics started to gain their independence, many of the Yugoslav National Army's military vehicles were captured and used to equip newly formed units of the Slovenian Army, Army of Serbian Krajina, Croatian Army, Army of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Army of the Republika Srpska. Early in the war, the GNA's armored units suffered heavy losses against the Croatian army. During the battle for the city of Vukovar, the inexperienced supporting infantry often refused to advance forward without tanks leading the way. This lack of proper infantry support made the tanks easy targets for the Croatian defenders, armed with handheld rocket launchers and anti-tank mines. One example was the destruction of 9 GNA armored vehicles on the infamous Trpinjska road. The Croatian National Guard, the precursor of the Croatian army, and members of the police, while keeping the GNA infantry at bay with mortar and sniper fire, destroyed 4 M-84s, 1 T-55, 3 BVP M-80 armored personnel carriers, and a TZI recovery vehicle. Even though the terrain of that part of Croatia was ideal for the use of armored units, being open and flat, instead of exploiting weak points or quickly maneuvering to a different position on the front line, tanks were often used as self-propelled guns or immobile hardpoints, completely ignoring the GNA's doctrine. Tank-on-tank engagements were very rare. On one occasion, however, the Croatian army attempted a breakthrough with several captured T-55s and probably one M-84 tank. They frontally attacked dug-in JNA M-84s and suffered losses. 3 T-55s were destroyed and 2 were damaged. As the M-84 had a three-man crew, the lack of a fourth crew member put an increased strain on them during maintenance due to an insufficient increase in auxiliary staff at the unit level. Enemy action was not always the cause of tank losses, as many accidents occurred due to inadequate or skipped maintenance. For example, the lack of regular cleaning of the cannon barrel could result in a deformation upon firing. The projectile would take a couple of milliseconds longer to exit, and the pressure exerted from a longer duration of time deformed the barrel enough to become stuck between the cannon trunnions during the recoil cycle. In another instance, the shell exploded in the cannon breech and launched the barrel almost 30 meters in front of the tank, while the breech ended up hitting the back of the turret. Luckily, the crew survived with only minor injuries. Another flaw of the M-84 was that the commander needed to be exposed in order to operate the anti-aircraft machine gun, as it could not be fired remotely. This is the case with almost all tanks built on the T-72 platform, and the machine gun was commonly left unused or removed to prevent snagging on foliage and debris. In the Bosnian hills or urban fighting, due to the low turret roof, a lack of gun elevation and depression became noticeably problematic. The auto-loading system proved reliable, but almost all hits to the lower sides of the tank ignited the ammunition storage with deadly consequences. The frontal armor of the M-84 was never penetrated during the war, but one vehicle was put out of service after it was hit with what was most likely an unexploded, high-explosive or illumination shell fired from either a 122mm howitzer or 130mm field cannon. The projectile struck the glacis plate and warped the hull longitudinally, making it structurally unsound, so it was written off. Around 40 M-84s were destroyed during the war, but some were later repaired. M-84s were last used against the Kosovo Liberation Army during the 1999 NATO bombing campaign of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. Although the main tank used against KLA insurgents was the T-55, the M-84s were kept in reserve for the expected land invasion. The 252nd Armored Brigade managed to keep their tanks hidden from NATO aviation, and only a few tanks were lost. Many decoys were built and placed on fake fighting positions for the NATO aircraft to destroy. The official NATO reports numbered 110 tanks, 200 APCs, and 545 artillery pieces destroyed. In reality, the Yugoslav army lost 9 M-84s during the 78 days of constant bombing and KLA attacks. Since the land invasion never came and the peace treaty was signed, the Yugoslav Third Army, along with the 252nd Armored Brigade, nicknamed the Invisible Armored Brigade, withdrew from Kosovo province in front of the UN and NATO eyes, almost unscathed. Serbia still operates 199 M-84 and M-84As, along with a few M-84AS and AS-12 tanks included in this number. Kuwait still uses 149 of its M-84AB ABK tanks. Croatia has 72 tanks of the M-84A4 standard, 2 M95 Degman prototypes, and 1 M-84D. Slovenia operates 54 M-84 M-84As captured from the GNA. Bosnia and Herzegovina also has 16 M-84 M-84As in service. While the initial M-84 version was a slightly improved T-72 licensed copy, it spurned the Yugoslav arms industry into producing a competitive main battle tank that saw export success and is still in use to this day. However, due to the breakup of Yugoslavia, the production facilities were split up between the successor states, so none of them was able to keep producing the tank. That's all for this video. Make sure to follow our website, we'll be releasing new articles on the regular. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Reddit, and if you use Discord, there's a link to our community server in the description. Also, likes, comments, and subscriptions on YouTube are greatly appreciated. If you would like to help us continue to develop and expand, also consider donating on Patreon or PayPal. All of the funds will be used to help us enhance and design new articles and features for you. Until next time, keep us in your sights.